I am Iliana Limon-Romero. Very excited to be back with Alicia DelGallo.
Yay, finally.
Woo, we had a bit of a break. There was some travel.
Hi.
There was a hurricane. There were a few other things that happened.
There was a hurricane?
It was a hurricane. But we're really excited to be back and talking all things soccer. We've reached a pretty critical point in the season, nearing the very end, and then some very exciting times for all the teams. So, Alicia, catch us up on some of what we missed. I mean, they were knocked out of playoff contention while we were away.
Yes.
What are some of the highlights? Anything stand out from what the last few weeks have been like for the club?
It's just been pretty humbling for them to get knocked out of the playoffs for the second year in a row. It was something that was always a goal, but was always kind of iffy, especially with the coaching change mid-season. It's always a risk to do that and try to make the playoffs. So while it was a goal, I don't think it was a huge shock to anyone, especially with their play in the last few weeks that they didn't make the playoffs. And now all the focus is geared on these last two matches to try to win them for, as the players and coach say, pride, the fans, and jobs next season. So that's what we can expect to see motivation for. If it's not for the playoffs, it'll be for those three things. And you might see some players who maybe weren't on the field or in the starting lineup the past few games because Christ said he really wants to give everyone a shot to critically evaluate them. And there are some key players who were crucial in the beginning of the season and have not really played much under Christ. So maybe you'll get a chance to see them in these final two games.
Will be very, very interesting last stretch.
Yes.
All right. So we, as always, are taking your questions. We start off via Twitter. We have a bunch of questions that have already been submitted to @OSLions, but we're also on Facebook Live. We're happy to answer any questions that roll in there, and then we will look back for stoppage time questions on @OSLions. All right, so let's get started with the first question submitted in advance. Patty Floyd, P-Val Floyd, Molino, how is that being handled? So let's take a step back. Before we say how it's handled, explain to people what's going on with Kevin Molino.
Okay, so Kevin Molino was called up to the national team as usual for Trinidad and Tobago to play in some matches. And after scoring a hat trick last week in one of their matches against the Dominican Republic, apparently, according to reports, he snuck out of camp, hit a nightclub, and the coach found out about it and kicked him off the team. This was not a one-time offense that was overreacted to about a month ago. He and two or three other players were fined heavily for a similar offense when they snuck out of camp to go to a boat party. And that was detailed on the Soca Warriors website. So Molino is on his way back. He was supposed to be back yesterday, but because of a layover and delay and stuff, he's getting in today. But Jason Christ did talk about it, speak on it a little bit today at training. He said that he's extremely disappointed if what he's read in media reports is accurate, but he doesn't know yet because he hasn't spoken to Molino yet. He's doing that probably as we speak this afternoon to get his side of the story. And it's being handled, basically, he said that he is someone that if that mistake were made here or if that transgression were made here, he would punish them here. But since it wasn't, he hasn't seen any of that type of behavior from Molino. He actually said that the story was shocking to him considering Molino's dedication, how humble he is and hardworking he is in training. He said it came as a shock. So I don't expect him to be punished within the club for what he did with the national team.
All right, very interesting. Big challenges for Kevin Molino.
Yeah.
One other bit of news, I guess, from Kevin. What's his future with the national team? What are his plans?
Yes, so the national team didn't really give a timeline of his return. They just kind of booted him from camp. And they have some big World Cup qualifiers coming up in November that people were wondering, will they allow Molino to compete in those? But the day after he was kicked off, he put on Snapchat that he is taking a year off from national team play. So we'll see if that holds after this all, plays out and there's some time to think about things. But according to him and his social media accounts 2 days ago, he's taking a year off of training.
That will be very interesting. If he continues and is held over on the Orlando City roster, that could be maybe a silver lining out of a tough situation.
Yeah, for Orlando City.
Because he's able to stay healthy and stay within the training confines. But this was pretty surprising. Not so much the social aspect. I think he's a boisterous, outgoing person, but his passion for the national team. It's something that's been very well documented on his social media accounts, and it's really unfortunate because it does seem like he really took that personally. Like he really cared about representing his country, as most players do. But he's just someone who seemed to really wear it on his sleeve. So
yeah, like his Twitter account was all social media tweets about the national team. Even more so than Orlando City at times. So
yeah, love of country. So, well, we'll keep monitoring and see how it goes. You can keep following Alicia DelGallo at OS Alicia D and at OS Lions for the latest updates on that. It's going to be very interesting to hear more. We do have a Facebook Live question I'm going to take real quick, but it's one that we may have some challenges answering. This is from Misiel Rosa. Apologies if I didn't pronounce it correctly. You can always feel free to send me pronunciation instructions. Is the Bastian Schweinsteiger rumors real? So I guess we should talk about rumors in general, because this is the time of year where rumors are big.
Yeah, I would say we don't typically comment on rumors or talk about them too much. There's always rumors flying around, a significant number of them involving Orlando City, as with every team. But as soon as we hear anything substantial and can confirm anything, that is when I'll comment on rumors and let you guys know as soon as possible. So rumors are rumors right now.
Rumors are rumors, but we'll keep you posted. You can always keep following Alicia on how things go. Obviously, Orlando City has tried to build its global brand, try to build its reach, and that makes them very popular. There's obviously some needs on the roster, so that's going to continue to make them popular. So I think you're just going to hear a lot of rumors, and it's something that fans are just going to have to write out and see which ones come to fruition and which ones don't. But what did Christ tell you about the roster in general, though, in terms of what he was thinking? Obviously, he's had some thoughts, but it doesn't seem like he's tipping his hand anytime soon.
He's not. He's not giving up any names or anything like that. He did say there's a core group of players on the roster now who he has identified as a group that will be back, and he's going to build the roster around them. There's also a few OCB players that he believes he will sign to MLS contracts this year and bring up with the team. And of course, he's going to make changes elsewhere. This is a team that he did not select on his own. He was brought in to do what he could with them. So now he's really going to make his mark, build his philosophy on the team. So you can expect a significant amount of changes in the offseason. And with that probably comes 3 times the rumors.
The rumors. All right. Let's take our next question from Twitter. And we have Michael Butera, at _Michael Butera. Which OCB players have the biggest shot at making the OCSD squad next year? So you've seen quite a few OCB players in training. Who has stood out? Who's looked good?
Yeah. So the main players at training, I think, are Cox and probably Pierre da Silva. I believe that Coxie, they call him Coxie, sorry. He was a leading scorer for OCB this year. He's big, he's dynamic. He kind of looks a bit like Kyle Larin when they stand next to each other. It's hard to kind of tell them apart. He even wears a brace on his wrist, although it's the opposite wrist as Kyle. So if you're thinking about Kyle potentially moving on in the near future, because he's drawing a lot of interest from other clubs and overseas and things like that, Cox might be someone that is a similar build and could train under him and provide that type of, big forward athletic guy. So I like what I've seen from him. And then Pierre da Silva, he's the one that everybody's been talking about, the assists leader for OCB this year. Really young, really really focused and dedicated and hungry to make it to MLS. So I think those 2 players have a lot of potential.
All right, it'll be interesting to see what impact that has on the rest of the roster, too, through the last 2 weeks of training, pushing them quite a bit. We have one more Facebook Live question that rolled in I want to get to before anybody drops off that broadcast. Why is it, this is also from Misiel Rosa, why isn't Ramos playing? So Rafael Ramos has not had many opportunities on the field in quite some time.
It's been a little puzzling because about a month ago, I think now, maybe 3 weeks to a month, Ramos said that he was healthy and ready and he didn't know what else he could show the coach to get on the field and get playing time, and yet Kevin Alston was still playing. Rafa wasn't even on the bench. I kept asking week after week, like, what's going on? Was basically told it was coach's decision at this moment. But then in the last game, Actually, in Toronto, I saw him doing some additional exercises on the side with a trainer alone after practice, and asked about him, and they said that he still wasn't 100% and every once in a while would have some pain. So he was available for selection, but might not be 100% again. So there's a lot of questions surrounding it, but the best answer would be that it's been a coach's decision not to play him. So whether that's, Kreis felt comfortable with Alston and rewarding him for stepping in and doing a commendable job most of the time, or he just didn't want to risk it with Rafa. It was his choice. So he's one of the ones that I think, in my mind, he would see playing time in these last 2 games, because Kreis hasn't gotten a chance to evaluate him in a game, really.
All right. Well, it'll be very interesting to see how that progresses and what opportunities he gets. It certainly looks like he's training hard, so you can't fault that part.
He looks like he's training harder than he ever was in the beginning of the season when he was starting regularly. He has been, last year he had an issue with his temper. He was really good at controlling that in the beginning of the season, except for during the first New England game. But he's even more so controlled and humbled, and seems a lot more mature than he was even in the beginning of the season. So he's just putting his head down and working. He looks very fit. He's faster than everybody else on the field. So,
fresh legs.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, will be interesting to see. All right, we'll take our next question from Twitter from Cal Bell at American Treasure 13. What will men's side players, leadership, fans do to promote, market, and support Pride's attendance numbers in 2017 beyond the obvious? So the Orlando Pride ranked second in NWSL in attendance during their inaugural season. That's a good mark. Lagged way behind the first place team, Portland Thorns. But still, there was a thought throughout NWSL, everyone that I've heard from really felt that was a good base. They started at a good level, felt there was room to grow it, and felt that the new stadium, will they be playing, smaller size, better fan experience, that might just continue to create and grow and build the fan base. So what can be done, though, and what can people expect to see from the club?
I mean, I think the new stadium is going to help a lot, because it's really going to be a home, and they can actually help advertise both teams within the stadium, and you didn't really see a whole lot of that in the Citrus Bowl. But the men's side, I think they just need to continue what they're doing. They did a significant amount. They did promotional videos together. They put out videos like wishing them luck in their inaugural game and things like that. So I think maybe joint appearances, joint community efforts, things like that might help to build the women's side. But I agree, it's been a good base. People need to remember that the attendance numbers for NWSL games are significantly lower than MLS games. So they did start at a good number.
I think the other challenge is, the Olympics were really hard on this group, and I know there were some complaints about a drop-off in maybe social media or other stuff toward the end of the season, but it was just a rough end to the year for the Pride. They made a big push. They did the best that they could with the circumstances, but as an extension side, it's even harder than MLS in terms of coming in, because there are fewer teams. You're dealing with at times a smaller pool of players that are potentially available for an NWSL roster, and they played the hand that they had and did quite well, but it was only so much you can do to mask how hard it is to have players in and out. The schedule stopping for an extended period of time and then restarting, them playing a whole bunch of road games before the Olympics, then having the Olympics that were gone for like 6-7 weeks.
And having your 2 highest profile players gone half the year and not available for the promotional things and the community things, that has an impact as well. Yeah,
it's tough. And for a lot of these players too, the promotions are not just what they do with the Pride. I mean, there are times when the club would love to promote them even more, but they also have to do their own personal endorsement availabilities. They have to go and do photo shoots and videos and other things, because that's how they supplement their income. It's a whole different set of challenges, but I really think the club is doing its best to support them. Every player we've ever interviewed has said nothing but great things about the organization and the front office. They're very content with where they were at in the support they got.
Well, and the game day experience and the atmosphere for the games will just be so much better in the new stadium as well, because it won't feel so huge and empty.
And it took Portland a while to get to where it's at. That's worth noting too. They're not just at this number automatically. They did have a huge base to support them out of the gate, but this game day experience grew for them, and it's because they had their own space where they were truly marketed, and so I see potential for it to continue to grow. I know it was a tough first year because people had hoped for even more. But I think give it time. We'll see a lot more.
Yeah.
All right. So next Twitter question. Patty Floyd at PVal Floyd. How is the spirit of players at training? Down, worried, quiet? Do you sense a different atmosphere? If so, describe.
Honestly, I feel like they're not down or worried or quiet at all. However, there is a different atmosphere because the training is slightly different. They're doing a lot more scrimmaging towards the end of training. And again, we're only let in for 15 minutes, the last 15 minutes of training. So from what I've seen, the OCB players are there. They have full squad, 5 or 6 OCB players, lots of rotation, lots of scrimmaging. So I feel like maybe the competitive spirit and teamwork aspect of things is greater now, and they're more focused on scrimmaging and showcasing their skills than just kind of pounding through the drills, if that makes sense. But as far as spirit, I don't really see any change or disappointment in them at all. I think it was just they had to push the disappointment of not making the playoffs to the side very quickly because they all know changes are coming. They need to close out this season on a high note, and they need to play for their jobs, and they have a whole new crop of fresh young players that are competing for their jobs as well, in addition to whoever they're looking at outside of the club. So I think the work ethic and the competition is even greater now than it was.
It seems like there is a slight difference between other sports that I've had a chance to observe and soccer in terms of the devotion to the club, in terms of what they're hoping to accomplish, and in terms of how they close out a season with the playoffs off the table. There still seems to be a lot of pride and a really heavy investment. I've been around some teams that have gone through some losing seasons and who haven't made playoffs, and there's definitely some of what you hinted at in your question, but it seems very different for this club. Some of it is the circumstances of finding your place on the roster. Some of it is devotion to the fans and just to want to give them a good note.
Yeah.
Some of it is just personal pride. Like, I am not that record. I am better than that. Yeah. We hit a skid and we are a better team than that. But I don't sense a give up at all.
Well, and when you have a coach who says that if the players do give up, he's watching and they won't be back, then
that's certainly high motivation as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think we have not been, the classic signs of, well, season's over, we're done, that's it. Some of the quotes right before this is a must-win game kind of situation kind of hinted that maybe it would be that way. But I think it was just they quickly flipped the switch.
Yeah, and I think it was helpful that they had, basically an entire week off after that loss to mourn and do whatever they wanted and be unmotivated if they wanted to without the coach watching. So they had 4 days off, and that was extended to 5 days because of the hurricane, 6 days because of the hurricane. So they had a week off to gather themselves and get over the disappointment and get back to work.
Very good. All right, next question. We have Kyle Meardo, Mears Beards.
What's up, Mears Beards?
Who on the men's first team is being the vocal leader lately? Need one for the last 2 games and going into next year. So who has emerged as some of the key leaders for this team?
Prior to the last couple of weeks where they hadn't been doing well, I think that Nocerino had really stepped up as a vocal leader on the pitch. You could hear him during games, but even more so in practice. And it was kind of the veterans that were being asked to step up and take a more vocal role. It was Nocerino, it was Mateos, regardless of what you think of him, and his play. It was Mateos, it was Nocerino, obviously Kaká, though he's a little bit more quiet, and it was Julio, and it was really those players who were asked to step up and take a vocal role as veterans on the team and get everybody motivated when they were in the game. So, I think you would see Nocerino the most vocal during training.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right, next question. We have from Ian F. IFNORL. What is the big announcement that OCSC is making today? Ooh, do you know what the big announcement is, Alicia?
I do know what the big announcement is. It's in 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
So you don't have to wait long. And the information is embargoed. So I cannot share exactly what it is right now, but I can give you a hint that it will revolve around the season finale match against DC United. There's something going on, and they will let you know in 10 minutes, and we'll have something posted later today on OrlandoSentinel.com as well, kind kind of a recap of what they have planned.
Very exciting. Should be very interesting. Just a few more minutes. All right, next question. Again, from Ian F. It's at IF in ORL. Why does Christ not seem more concerned about missing the playoffs again?
I think it's because he just joined the team. And he's only had a few months to work with a cast of players that he didn't choose. He didn't select. So I don't think the fault was ever with Christ or was ever going to be with Christ, regardless of if they made the playoffs or not. So he doesn't need to be concerned.
All right.
Definitely, it was a disappointment for him.
Yeah.
You could see it in his face, you could hear it in his words, but it wasn't like a end of the world, I'm going to lose my job type of thing, as it would have been for Adrian had he stayed. So not his fault, focusing on these last 2 games, and then he gets to pick the team that he wants.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of an uphill battle. It was going to be a tough push for it. It looked promising for a little bit. They had that stretch where they got hot, and then the collapse. So I think he was really disappointed, felt they were pushing the right buttons, and unfortunately it didn't come together. So I don't know. I feel like I've been asked a couple of times, too, about his investment and his passion toward the team. And I think maybe it's probably because of a comparison of the 2 coaches that fans have been exposed to, but I have never had any doubt of how locked in and how competitive and how much he wants to win. That has always been pretty clear to me. Now, they express it in different ways. Their passion maybe for the fans and for other things may be a little bit different.
People are criticizing that when things get tough during the game, he kind of sits back on the bench and is pretty quiet and watches. But he's very much a thinker, like an internal, like quiet, and it comes across in everything that he does, in the way he coaches, in the way he gives interviews, in the way that he does everything. He's very, in his head, analyzing things. So I don't think that his lack of, boisterous coaching on the sidelines is a sign of, is a lack of passion.
There's also a good balance on his staff. You have different people. You've explained this before in some of your writing. Can you walk through what each of the coaches bring to the table that help balance out what you're seeing from Christ? Because Christ is, as you said, calculated, focused, driven. I mean, that jaw, it doesn't unlock. I can feel like he's passionate, but the other coaches.
The 3, I've gotten similar descriptions from all 3 of them, that they are the ones that kind of lighten up the mood for everybody. They're the ones that give the players the pats on the shoulders that they need, that scream when they need, that joke around when they need it, and that are tough when they need it too. And Christ is the even-keeled, intense, always focused one that keeps everybody in line.
All right, so that's their approach. I have a couple of Facebook Live questions. First, Marco Matrevesky just said hello. So hello,
Hi.
Marco. Thanks for joining us. And John Cubano, will there be any friendlies after the season is over? There traditionally are.
Yeah, there traditionally are. I know that they were waiting to see if they made the playoffs or not, because obviously that affects timing and everything like that. But I know they're trying to queue up some friendlies here and also possibly overseas. So things are getting worked out, and as soon as I know, or as soon as anything's solidified, I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, I definitely expect them to play some. I think some of the roster moves there's going to be all sorts of mechanisms for the expansion teams to get their players. There's obviously going to be the draft. And then there's going to be Orlando City figuring out what it's doing with its roster. And there's going to be a little bit of a lag, it seems, before all of that is finalized. And then I do think, it's a 10-month season, but I still think they're going to still play some in between.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, next question from Twitter to @OS Lions. Roscoe, at Macintosh Roscoe, will 2017 bring a mix of experienced MLS players plus some exciting youngsters in the squad, the first full season under Jason Christ?
I think definitely. Definitely some exciting youngsters, and not just exciting youngsters, but exciting youngsters that are coming up through the Orlando City club system. So he is really excited about the development and the way that OCB players have been performing. And so I think you're going to see, you saw Tony Rocha, Mikey Ambrose get pulled up this year. I think you're going to see more OCB players, young OCB players pulled up in the off season. And I think it's going to be a really good mix.
It'll be very interesting. I think one of the things that they did that seems to have been working out pretty well is he embraced the system that they already had in place. Part of the OCB system was, this would dovetail well with what Adrian Heath believed in and what he wanted,
Yeah.
and somehow they landed on a coach that is keeping that system in place and is getting a lot of the same things that he wants out of it too. Very interesting.
It is.
All right, next question from Twitter. Victor at VicRiv08. We know to expect numerous changes next year. Who do you think won't be here? Oh, always a tough question.
It is, and I hate giving names, especially when I know that everyone's getting evaluated this week and next week in training. But I think I said earlier today on Bianchi's show that I think the entire back line needs to kind of watch out. And if he's moving to a 4-4-2, there's some midfielders, there's certain types of midfielders as far as more athletic midfielders with pace and speed that are needed, that you might have to swap some out to get that.
Yep. It'll be interesting to see too. Some of this is really tricky because even if you want to make a change, even if you've identified somebody who maybe is not quite the right fit at the moment or is just struggling, a lot of these contracts, we don't have all the terms through MLS. The club and MLS do not necessarily release everything in terms of the duration of the contract. A lot of times obviously we have the salary that's released twice a year from the Players Association, but other than that, and by the way, we still haven't seen the second release of the year. It's a little delayed from where it used to be before. But other than that, there's some different mechanisms in place. And when you talked with Nocerino about how he felt going into the end of the year, he's someone who had gotten a lot of criticism, then had played really well, and then had the entire team struggled. So that was kind of representative of him too. So you go through all those things, but he said, I've got a contract.
Yeah, he said I have another year left on my contract with an option, and he wants to finish his career in Orlando. So he was like, I don't have a problem with the club. If they have a problem with me, then they can make changes.
Right.
But then you also, with someone like him, you have to find someone who is willing to take on his contract in his pretty high salary for an older player that is getting better and has been doing well and moving in the right direction for Orlando City, but still needs some work.
Right. So a lot of those things, there's a lot of logistics going on. There's some players that fans have complained a little bit about in terms of production that some of them they're going to be able to move as people would wish to upgrade, and others are the contract is what the contract is. So it's going to be interesting to see. All right. We have another Facebook Live question that I want to get to, another one from John Cubano. Thanks for joining us, John. Is the stadium on schedule to open on time for the start of the 2017 season?
Yes, 100%. The stadium will be open.
All right, very definitive there. Next question via @OS Lions Twitter. emark21 at emark21. Have there been any names of interest to bring to our club for next season? Has the front office #lost control? Too much partying lately?
There have been rumors of names on social media and obviously in foreign media, but nothing solid yet. And the club has not circulated any names of interest outside of the OCB players that I mentioned. The front office lost control, too much partying. The Molino thing happened when he was with the national team. But I think I know some people complained that they saw the team out after the last loss. And I understand how that would irk you, but I do think it's kind of typical and normal to want to maybe drown your sorrows a little bit after you get eliminated from the playoffs and you have an entire week off coming up. So I don't think they've lost control. I think it's the end of a disappointing season, and they had an entire week off to do what they wanted.
Right, right. I think that question might be a little more warranted if you had player arrests, other issues, other off-the-field incidents, people misbehaving, but really this is pretty normal for professional athletes. It's not unusual. We've seen the same with Orlando Magic players. We've seen the same with all other groups.
Although most of the top Orlando Magic players, if they're out, they're not drinking. So maybe that's what,
Yeah. It depends. All right. So I think the club is monitoring everything, though. If you're thinking, the front office is not paying attention, they're not aware. There's no question they're aware. They know what's going on, and so we're about to go through a roster tweaking. So I think everything's on the table, and we'll see how it goes. All right. Next question via Twitter. Kyle Mirdo, Beards is back. What is happening with Raul Aguilera Jr.? He was supposed to play with OCB this year.
Okay, so he has an academy contract, and he has one that allows him to play with OCB if they need him. So he has trained mostly with OCB this year and has been on the bench for a few games, but that's all that is. Someone that in the academy that they think is promising and that they allow to train with them and could play with them if they needed him, but they haven't yet.
All right, one more Facebook question from Marco Matreski. Will going a new player in Orlando City? So I think the question is, will Orlando City be adding new players at this point? And we've kind of touched on, we absolutely expect changes to this roster. So this will include not just, what's there, but you expect new players?
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, next question on Twitter. Oh, it's a wrap. We're going to check for some stoppage time questions before we get going, and we appreciate everyone who joined us on Facebook Live. We are going to do the show, barring any natural disasters, next Thursday ahead of the home finale against DC United, and then we will do one more wrap-up show just to catch up on everything that has happened. The timeline of changes, some of these questions that you all have been asking, we are expecting a little bit of a lag after the season ends, so I don't think you're going to get instantaneous answers, unfortunately. But part of that is to Orlando City's tactical advantage. You have lots of mechanisms coming up where teams are jockeying, negotiating. There's going to be an expansion draft, and there's just certain things that you want to do where you don't necessarily tip your hand so that you're able to make the kind of moves you want to make. So I would anticipate maybe some quiet after the season.
I have one more. I just retweeted it on the wrong account, though.
Well, why don't we just read it out loud?
Okay.
Who's it from?
Read it. It is from Giovanni Cossetti at Cossetti 5, I think that's what it says. Oh, 561. Okay. What will the ticket prices for the new stadium be? Will ticket price change for regular season games compared to playoff games? So we've seen the season ticket prices for the new stadium already, and those have been relatively in line. Some have increased in certain areas, some have remained the same or even decreased slightly in certain areas. So I would expect there to be probably a slight increase or around the same price if you're lucky enough to get a single game ticket right from Orlando City. Now, in the resale next year of tickets, I think you're going to see inflated prices compared to this year because there's going to be less tickets available.
Well, I think it entirely depends on performance, too. Yeah. I think early in the season, the prices are going to be set high. One of the things we've seen about the Orlando market, though, is when there's a big event, when a new stadium opens, people sometimes buy extra tickets, maybe more than they can consistently use, and then they try to sell them on the resale market around the same price. Sometimes that works, sometimes that doesn't. When we saw UCF Stadium open, Bright House Network Stadium, it was not uncommon for somebody who had 2 season tickets to be like, oh, this is going to be very exciting. Everybody's going to want to go. They bought 4 season tickets. They put them on the resale market. They didn't sell for nearly as much as they did before. And then the following year, people dropped back down to exactly the number they wanted. So it's really going to depend on the club's success. The market will allow what the market allows. So if the team's successful, there are very few seats available, everybody wants to be in the stadium, those prices are going to naturally drive up. I think playoffs, yes, I would expect for there to be an increase on playoff tickets. That's the same for NBA. That's the same for other professional sports. It's going to be really interesting to see because I've heard, obviously they hit the mark that they wanted to for season tickets, but I've heard from some people who were like, yeah, I don't know if I want to be at every single game. There are some challenges. It's a long season, and some of these games are played in really hot conditions, really tough situations. So we'll see what happens. But the way to guarantee a ticket obviously is to buy a season ticket, and then after that, it's going to be what the market does.
Yeah, and you can't buy a season ticket anymore, so
you can get on a waiting list. Other than that, that's about it. All right, so that's a wrap for our questions. Let's talk about what we expect to see. Philadelphia,
big game for Philadelphia. They need these 3 points. They are just over the playoff cut line, so Orlando City is trying to steal those points from them. Play spoiler a little bit. They know that it's going to be a tough matchup. They've played each other well previously this season. And injury update on Breck Shea that I got today. He's not doing well. They were hoping he would be back in training on Wednesday, and he wasn't, and he was not out there today either. Christ said that he isn't doing well. He's in a lot of pain. He can't walk without limping, so don't expect to see him against Philadelphia.
All right, it'll be interesting to see. For all the latest updates, be sure to keep following Alicia DelGallo. She's at OSLeashD and at OS Lions. We will continue to update on all the latest things from Orlando City. And we're going to have more details soon on this big announcement for the coming up from Orlando City. All right, with Alicia, I'm Iliana Limon-Romero, and thanks for joining us at OrlandoSentinel.com.